Ever heard that saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do? Get ready to check that out the window because today we are diving headfirst into a story of internet culture clashing with, let's just say, a slightly more structured way of life.
It's a story that really exposes the fault lines between online fame, cultural expectations, and the very real consequences of a canceled live stream.
Exactly. We're talking about IShowSpeed's trip to Singapore, and trust me, this isn't just for the gamers and the meme lords out there. This is a story that's got something for anyone who's ever scrolled through their phone and thought, how does this online world actually work in the real world?
It really makes you think about those connections, doesn't it?
It really does. So for those who might not be glued to Twitch 24/7, we're talking about Darren Watkins Jr., better known to the internet as IShowSpeed, a 19-year-old streaming superstar.
And when I say superstar, millions upon millions of followers across platforms, we're talking upwards of 60 million. This is a guy who can draw a crowd with a single tweet.
And he was on a Southeast Asia tour. And the crowds in Malaysia, in Indonesia, they were absolutely bonkers, people going crazy just to be near him.
It's a Gen Z energy. The unpredictable high-energy streams, the gaming, the real-life antics, the kind of stuff that goes viral in an instant. It creates this incredible hype, this feeling of anything could happen.
And that brings us to Singapore, the final stop on the tour. Things took a very unexpected turn.
Let's just say Singapore. Singapore has a certain reputation. A certain love for order, for structure, for doing things by the book.
Which is totally fair, but that's where these two worlds, IShowSpeed's brand of internet chaos and Singapore's way of doing things, really collided.
It was a clash of expectations. His team probably anticipated the same kind of, shall we say, leniency they'd encountered in other countries. But Singapore, especially in public spaces, operates a little differently.
And this all came to a head at, of all places, Universal Studios Singapore.
The plan was a live stream. Fans were hyped, ready to see what kind of mayhem IShowSpeed would unleash in a theme park. But instead of the usual chaos, instead of the entertainment, the stream, it just
Gone.
17 minutes in.
17 minutes. Can you imagine the frustration?
The internet, as you can imagine, did not take it well. Reddit exploded. Twitter was on fire.
Everyone was blaming everyone else. People were furious at the influencer who'd helped set up the visit, Jan Hao Tan, blaming him for not prepping IShowSpeed and his team on the whole rules are rules thing.
And let's not forget the blame directed at Universal Studios Singapore themselves.
Like, how could you not be prepared for IShowSpeed?
As it turns out, the root of the problem was surprisingly mundane: filming permits.
The dreaded permits.
Seems that this little requirement, something that's pretty standard in a lot of countries, wasn't really on the radar for IShowSpeed's team. And to be fair, navigating those regulations in different countries, it can be a logistical nightmare even for seasoned pros.
Absolutely. This whole debacle just goes to show you how crucial it is to really understand the legal side of content creation, especially when you're dealing with a global audience and different countries' rules.
Couldn't agree more.
No more Universal Studios Singapore. Fans are understandably upset, and it sparks this whole other conversation.
Because on the surface, it might seem like just a bunch of fans overreacting to a canceled live stream, but I think it speaks to something deeper, a kind of anxiety that's pretty common, especially among Gen Z, who've grown up with this constant connection, this expectation of on-demand entertainment.
It's like having the plug pulled on you right when your favorite show is getting good.
Exactly. And when your favorite streamer is just a click away, having that access suddenly cut off, it's jarring. It's disruptive.
And let's be real. That expectation of constant access, of feeling like you're part of something bigger, that's a huge part of what drives internet culture.
Absolutely. And it's what makes IShowSpeed's experience at Causeway Point so interesting.
Causeway Point.
Yeah, it's this popular shopping mall in Woodlands.
Yeah.
So even after the whole Universal Studios debacle, word gets out that IShowSpeed is at Causeway Point, and you know what happens.
What?
Crowds still flock to see him. It wasn't about the live stream anymore. It was about bridging that gap between online and offline, about being part of the spectacle, even if it meant just catching a glimpse of the guy.
It just goes to show you the power these internet personalities have. They're not just entertainers, they're like community builders, and they have this direct line to millions of people.
Exactly. But here's the thing. This whole incident, it wasn't just about fan frustration or even IShowSpeed's team overlooking some permits. It ignited this whole conversation about Singapore itself.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You had people on these online forums, Singaporeans, saying they were embarrassed that their country was chosen for the tour, questioning if Singapore was just too strict, too uptight. And then you had others jumping in, defending the regulations, emphasizing how important it is to maintain order, especially with major events like the F1 Grand Prix happening around the same time.
So it became a debate about individual expression versus the needs of the many.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because it's easy to simplify it, to say, oh, this is just what happens when a chaotic streamer tries to navigate a rule-bound country. But it goes much deeper than that, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. This whole thing, it really exposes this fundamental tension, right? This clash between the internet, this boundless, borderless world, and the very real borders, the rules, the cultural norms that shape how we live offline.
And it's a tension that's only going to become more and more pronounced as the lines between being famous online and just existing in the real world continue to blur.
It's this whole thing became a giant Rorschach test for how we see these two worlds, online and offline, bumping into each other.
Precisely. And get this, right after the Singapore shutdown, IShowSpeed, he heads over to Johor Bahru in Malaysia. That's the chatter that was going around these online forums. Now, can we confirm there's a direct link? Not really. But it does raise a fascinating question, doesn't it? How do governments, especially those known for, let's say, carefully managing their image, how do they handle this new world of global online influencers?
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You've got these governments used to controlling the narrative, and then you've got someone like IShowSpeed who's all about unpredictability, pushing those boundaries. It's got to be a tough one.
No doubt. And it really highlights this whole other layer of complexity. How do these different approaches to public image to entertainment, how do those coexist going forward? Because this isn't going away, right? The internet, online personalities, this is the new reality.
It's so true. And it's not even just about one streamer or one country's rules. This whole saga, it's like a case study. It shows us just how much the world is grappling with this whole online fame thing. How do you balance freedom of expression with being culturally sensitive? These are big questions. And they're not going to get any easier as those lines between what we do online and who we are in the real world, they just keep getting blurrier and blurrier.
It's a constant evolution, that's for sure. And it's not even just about finding the right answers. It's about understanding what's at play here. The internet, with how fast it moves, how globally connected it is, it's changed everything. It's given individuals a voice, created communities, brought people together in ways we couldn't have imagined before. But with all that comes a whole new set of challenges.
For sure, like figuring out those cultural differences, managing your online persona, and just wrapping your head around the fact that what you do in the digital world, it can have very real consequences in your offline life.
Precisely. We're all still figuring out how this internet thing fits into the real world with all its cultural differences and societal norms. It's messy, right?
Totally. Where do we even go from here? What does all this mean for content creators, for fans, for anyone who spends time online? Because that's pretty much everyone these days, right?
It tells us we've got to be more aware, more thoughtful about how we engage online. Maybe a little more planning wouldn't hurt either, because going viral, it's not always sunshine and roses. And honestly, it's a two-way street. Content creators have got to be mindful of their reach, their impact. Fans need to be engaged, think critically about what they're seeing. And societies, they've got to find ways to adapt, to make room for this new media landscape without stifling the creativity and, honestly, the fun of what makes the internet so interesting in the first place. It's a delicate balance, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Like you said earlier, context is everything. And in this globalized, hyper-connected world, understanding that context, being sensitive to those differences, that's more crucial now than ever. It's a constant conversation, a work in progress.
Couldn't have put it better myself. It's about finding that balance, right? Freedom and responsibility, two sides of the same coin. And we're all in this together, figuring it out one deep dive at a time.